To go back to Scott Walker for a second, one of the things that's interesting is, if he's going to be running for president, and we're probably going to see another Rick Santorum campaign and maybe a Chris Christie campaign. One of the things that was
Carson.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about Scott Walker is he had to really, later in this campaign, especially when it was clear that he had a substantive, big, serious challengers, he had to run from a lot of the stuff, a lot of his more conservative positions. He actually ran an ad that was straight to camera that was, "I'm pro-life, but..." And then he sort of talked about how, well, we passed these measures to make sure that pregnant women are safer, which was his way of talking about the transvaginal ultrasounds.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, ultimately our law left the decision between a woman and her doctor, which of course was only because it's required by the Constitution and Roe v. Wade still stands.
Right.
It wasn't out of his choice.
Right.
It's one of those things, and he talked about when a minimum wage came up, which like in every other state was overwhelmingly popular in Wisconsin. When they say, well, what do you think of what the minimum wage should be? Scott Walker actually said, well, I'm not sure it serves much of a purpose. My point is to create jobs that pay even more than the minimum wage. He's in a way there are conservatives who don't. He's one of the conservatives that doesn't even really, in principle, believe that the government should set a base wage, and that was never really clear. He ran from that from the beginning, and I think it's going to be interesting when folks like Scott Walker transition to the Republican primary, because I can see someone like Rick Santorum using that abortion ad against him.
Oh yeah, and I still contend that the race that Mitt Romney really lost it. And I don't know if the White House did this on purpose or not. But when they came out with those contraceptive mandate in the Affordable Care Act, they didn't have to do it then. They had months and months and months to do that. But they dropped that bomb somewhere, I think it was in February. And that was, again, a live grenade in the middle of the Republican primary. And that's when Rick Santorum was like, I'm going to champion this thing. And then Mitt Romney had to jump right in too, and that it pulled him right exactly where they wanted it. And it was almost as if there was an attempt to do the same thing. I mean, that's what really motivated, I think, female voters in that 2012 election. But there was no issue around that was in the news that could sort of continue on that narrative. And that's what was absent from this campaign.
Yeah, and I think to the point that you and Cliff were making earlier about sort of campaigning on what you believe in, I think that Walker was just one example on women's reproductive rights. Cory Gardner spent practically half his campaign running away from his support for a personhood amendment. Yep. These Republicans, the very, very pro-life sort of extremist Republicans, won by hiding their true feelings on women's reproductive rights.
That's right. And the way that they were enabled to do that is because you didn't have Democrats really pushing theirs across the board. It's much easier to do that, I think, when you're not being sort of pulled into the deep end of the pool.
And I think that Mary Burke in Wisconsin did actually a pretty good job of stating her position. But then you have pundits who say that, well, Democrats shouldn't be focusing on such a single issue, as if women's reproductive rights was like a vanity project.
Right, exactly. That's just like you want one specific exit on the highway to be improved, and you've got to think of the whole infrastructure.